Believe we are.
It says it's live streaming, so it must be true.
It must be true.
It says it right on my screen. It must be, and it's on the internet, so
I'm telling you, if it's on the internet, life is
it
golden.
must be true.
All right, let's see. Make sure. I just hope people have internet this evening.
I know.
Are you live? Are you live? Are you live? We're live. Oh, sweet Jesus. That just makes me so happy. I get nervous every single time this happens. All righty, friends, good evening. Welcome to yet another edition of Pastor Pals. Everybody hates it that I say Pastor Pals, Lori, but I say it. Well, and when I say everyone, I mostly mean my wife.
I'm here for it. I'm here for it.
There we go. See, there we go. Friends, I am excited to welcome colleague and minister. We've gone ecumenical tonight on Pastor Pals. Crazy.
Wild Presbyterians and UCC.
Oh my gosh. Friends, please welcome the senior minister of Mayflower, UCC, Lori Walke. Thank you for taking time to join us on the Pastor Pals show this evening.
It is a joy to be here.
I have to do a special welcome to you from our choir director, Ann Dawson, says a special hello to you. I believe that Vicki used to be your organist. Is that correct?
Yes, Ann and Vicki have a special place here at Mayflower, and we miss them both, but and especially in a year where no one has been able to see anybody for any real amount of time. You've got a good one there.
Totally, absolutely. Well, thank you again. Thank you for taking time. This is a fun little bit on a Tuesday night where I get to gather with fellow colleagues in ministry, and we get to just chew the fat about ministry, what it is to minister in a time like this. We are currently about to enter a sermon series on spiritual disciplines. That's what we're going to do during Lent. Do you all have any special plans there at Mayflower during Lent?
You know, Ash Wednesday has always been a deeply meaningful service for this congregation. And it is actually, last year, it was the last, we had a couple of services, Sunday worship services, but it was the last liturgical service that we had in person. And so that it is now, we've come all the way back and we are doing this virtually. It is, it's an interesting time, but we are continuing to find ways to say, here's how we're going to make this meaningful this year.
Yeah.
So we've got, of course, Ash Wednesday tomorrow night. And then throughout the season of Lent, we have a prayer wall accessible in our columbarium where we are inviting folks to come and write their prayers on strips of fabric and then weave that into an installation that will form an ampersand. Our theme this year for Lent is again and again. Again and again, we find ourselves in broken places. Again and again, we find that God shows up. And so we're taking that as a holy and this season to say, okay, although we've got some brokenness, there is also wholeness to be found. So that's one of the things. And then we have every Sunday night during Lent at 5:00, we have what we call Theo practice, which is a time for us to talk some theology and then put it into practice. So Sundays at 5, we'll have that too. So those are some of our disciplines this season. What about you guys?
Tell me more about Theo practice. That's fun. I mean, I've heard of, the theology on taps, the pub theologies, all of those kinds of things. It sounds like you're taking it an extra step. What does that extra step look like?
Well, we are very, very good progressives around here. And we really like our book studies. We are very good at book studies. Continue to be very good at book studies. But we also wanted to really challenge ourselves. We did this, we actually started this series last year, last Lent, and we wanted to challenge ourselves to be intentional about pairing those theological conversations
Mhm.
with practice, like
Right.
actual action, and making commitments out of that grew out of those conversations into, okay, well, what are we going to do on Monday morning?
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. I like that a lot.
It's some of them are what people might consider very traditional spiritual practices or disciplines, like meditation. We're
Hmm.
bringing some folks in to talk about the practice of meditation, which Christians often call prayer. Um, but also some things like we have one session called Faithful Farewell, and it's a
Mm.
seminar on death and dying and planning for memorial or what happens after you die.
Wow.
And the ways that we can be faithful to ourselves and to God and to each other by thinking through some really practical things like, do I want to be cremated?
Right.
And we kind of think of those things often as like, oh, well, what's the spiritual element to that? But there can be, and there is one. I would argue there's definitely one. So those are the things that we wrestle with and talk about as a community.
That's fantastic. One of the things that I'm going to be preaching about for Sunday's sermon, you well know in this time, Sundays are not Sundays for us anymore. What day is Sunday for you right now?
Thursdays, we record service on Thursday, so it's Sunday, Thursday,
Yes.
Sunday.
Yes, Wednesday is Sunday for us. And so I was writing sermon this morning, which we will be recording tomorrow. And we're going to be talking about the spiritual practice of covenant,
Mhm.
covenant and actually covenant and submission as a spiritual practice. And we're gonna look at the Westies. This is a preview for you. We're going to be looking at the covenant that God struck with the people of the rainbow after the flood. And there's this really beautiful thing that I discovered through my research was that all of these covenants are really about bringing some order to some chaos, and they're very practical things that we do in order to help one another bring some order to our chaos. So when you're talking about, end of life planning like that, we have to understand those things as being spiritual practices, because that is a chaos time, right? Those of us who are preachers, we know that's a chaos time, and anything that we can do to bring some order to that is only going to make us that much more capable of responding to God's grace, I think.
That's a really beautiful way to think about covenant, I think, Landon, to bringing order to chaos. And I think that's the opening story of the Bible,
Right.
is bringing order to chaos. And then Genesis is filled with so many of those stories that are a little more obvious.
Right.
uh, and that word covenant, it's I think a very valuable and underutilized word and relationship
Mm-hmm.
today. We often think of relationships as contractual
Right.
instead of covenantal, and that is such a deep theological word to really dig into this Sunday.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. As I was doing some sermon work with another pastor friend of mine, she and I both noted, like, wow, what would life be like if if God was a contractual God and not a covenantal God? I mean, it would be all the things that we say we don't believe in when we talk about the things we don't believe in God. Those would actually be the true things, because those are contractual. Those are contractual kinds of things.
Right. And covenant is a particularly important word to the UCC denomination. We use the word covenant a lot, and that's
Yes.
in part because we're a non-creedal denomination. And so we talk a lot about what it means to be in covenant when you're
Mm,
sitting in a pew and the person on your left um, ardently believes in the virgin birth, and the person on your right would never, ever make that claim.
Right.
And what does it mean to be in covenant with one another and do the work of the kingdom without having to say we're all in agreement in all the things.
Right.
So that's a covenant, I think, is we gotta make that word common again in church for sure.
Yeah, I would like to see that very much. Presbyterians talk about being connectional a lot, and I've got a friend who
Another
says,
great word.
yeah, and I've got a friend who says that is good. You know, connectional is great. Let's up the ante. Let's not be just connectional. Let's be covenantal people with one another. And I really love that, because you're right. I mean, we are a creedal denomination, right? We say an affirmation of faith from one of our 10 different creeds and confessions every Sunday. Not that we all believe every single word of those things, but I do agree. I think maybe we lean on that a little more than is healthy. I don't know. Hmm?
I think
That was not. I
no
was not
matter
trying to ask you to
no,
critique
no,
Presbyterians.
this is like the really important conversations that pastors and churches need to have all the time,
Mhm.
is to constantly be holding that mirror up and
Yeah.
saying, are we living into the words that we use?
Yeah.
Is this really what we mean when we say we're connectional or covenantal, or that we're non-creedal or creedal even,
Right.
right? Like, are we living into this the way that we want,
Hmm.
truly want to?
Hmm.
And if we're not, let's work on it.
Right. Right. How did you get started doing what you do? Let's go in the Wayback Machine. Let's go way back.
Well,
How did Lori get started doing what she does?
there were two things that were certain in the house that I was raised in. My parents made sure that their four daughters were, one, in church every time the doors were open,
Right.
and
Right.
two, that we were going to go to college. And I was raised in a small Southern Baptist church,
You too.
incredibly faithful people. I know, yes,
Yes.
incredibly faithful people, and I carry their faithfulness with me to this day. They
Hmm.
taught me how to be a pastor. They taught me how to love scripture and love God and love people.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, we have some theological differences at this
Right.
point, and I have yet to be invited back to
Oh,
preach in the church that raised me. But oh, I mean, I'm still in a relationship with many
yeah.
of those folks.
Mm,
Um, the short-ish version is that I went to Oklahoma State on a basketball scholarship. Turns out half of my teammates were gay, and it also turns out that they were absolutely the same as me. They were worried about the things I was worried about.
right.
They were happy about the things I was happy about. And
Hmm.
a real good number of them were Jesus loving, good people. And
Right.
that was not exactly what I had been told
Right.
about the queer community.
Same.
And the second thing that was deeply impactful for me, I was a church nerd. I've been a church nerd my whole life. I never stopped going to church, even in that 18 to 22-year-old, people just float off into the ether.
Right. Right.
Don't like, church is just not a priority. It's not that 18 to 22-year-olds aren't interested in God and all of those things. It's
Right.
just
Right.
not a priority. But
Right.
I kept going to church, and the Baptist church I went to ordained female deacons, which was like,
Get
I know,
out.
right?
Wow.
And I went home and I told my mom this, and essentially, this is not exact quote, but her response was, I am so glad. Deacons' wives mostly do all the work. I'm just glad those women are getting credit for it.
Come on. Come on.
Which I find to be a very Southern Baptist woman response.
Yes.
So those two things, my relationships with my teammates and this church that empowered women to do a
Hmm.
specific ministry for the church. Those two things really started making me question some things that I had taught,
Right.
and I just started recognizing some things that I had been taught about God that did not align with my experience of God.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
I met my now husband in my first year and his second year of law school. He was actually a member at Mayflower UCC at the time, and so he's the one who took me to my first service here. And at the time, I was playing the piano for a very small Southern Baptist church, and I the idea was, if you don't use your gifts for God, you'll lose them. So
Hmm.
I was going to use that gift for God, but I was really, really adrift, not sure what to do, where to go, who to ask, who to have some hard conversations with.
Hmm.
And it turns out that my husband Colin was that person for me. And one of the earliest books that he shared with me was a book called The Meaning of Jesus by Marcus Borg and
Oh,
N.T.
that's a fantastic book.
It was a really important book for me to read at that point in my faith journey, because it was a conversation between two theologians who came down on sometimes opposite sides
Uh-huh.
of an issue, but they weren't mad at each other. They
Mm-mm,
weren't
mm-mm.
telling each other the other one was going to go to hell.
Right.
They were having very serious, very meaningful conversations in this book.
Right. Right. Right.
And that was really powerful to me. Once I started hearing some progressive Christian theology that made sense of my experience with God and this
Hmm.
new teaching, um, you look back and everything, you can see everything in 2020.
Right.
And it
I'd like
all,
to not look back at 2020 if that's okay.
I mean, like, not,
Sorry, it was a bad
I
joke.
know. Well,
Horrible, horrible.
how are you going to act like 2021 is like some kind of, oh, magical? No, we're still here, man. We're still doing this via Zoom.
Wait, hold on. Get out of town.
I know. I know. So, I mean, the rest is sort of kind of history, but essentially I was put in a context where I could answer yes to God's
Yeah,
call in my life that believe had been there all along. I had just not been able to answer it fully.
yeah.
And so I finished law school, took and passed the bar exam, then headed straight into seminary. And
Wow. Sister, you are a glutton for punishment.
hey, I took my parents very seriously about that college thing.
Apparently so.
Trying to be a good kid.
um, when you said, I really appreciate this. When you said it's not that 18 to 22-year-olds aren't interested, they've just got other things to focus on, or something to that effect. Everybody's worried about the young kids. We're worried about the young kids. I'm worried about the young kids. I've got 18 to 22-year-olds in my family, right? I've got sons. I've got 4 sons. 2 of them are in those age groups, and yeah, I worry about them. What do you say to congregants there at Mayflower when they express the worry that the young kids aren't around? I mean, I try to tell people the kids are all right, just let them be. But I think that people raise a really good point that we should be doing what we can to making sure that we are reaching out with both of our arms to these folks. What do you tell people?
Well, here's the bad news. This is sort of what my project was for my doctor of ministry.
Why is
And
this bad news? Are you about
so
to read your dissertation for me?
I can talk for a very long time. I'm just gonna say a couple of things, and Lana, you're just gonna have to cut me off, okay?
Okay, deal.
So there are a couple of things. The first thing is sometimes very disappointing for parents and grandparents to hear, but studies upon studies back this up. And it is this: we have all heard, train a child up in the way they should go, and they will not depart from it. Right. So we all come to church with like sort of this assumption that we're going to load up our kids with all of our values. And then that's how they're going to use those values to make all the decisions in the rest of their life.
Hmm.
But what studies show us is that no matter what kind of house you were raised in, whether you were in a house that was in church every time the doors were open, or you were raised by ardent atheists. When you are 18 to 22, that part of our life cycle, religion is just not a priority.
Right.
What
Right.
is a priority is political identity. And when I say political identity, I mean political values, how we shape the world. And
Wow.
very often that kind of our society is such right now that means that we're partisan. It doesn't have to. And by partisan, I mean teams that try to harass one another.
Right. Right.
But politics in a more general sense, the way that we think our society ought to be shaped, and what laws and rules and norms apply. So those crystallize in that 18 to 22, 24, 25-year-old time period. Then
Absolutely seeing that in my house. Absolutely.
yeah, when you start naming it and start being afraid of just saying, yeah, this is here's what this is, then we can actually do something with it. We can stop pretending like, kids have crystallized their value, like for all time values by the time they're 18 and don't have fully developed frontal cortexes. So
It ain't fully cooked yet.
I mean, it's just who we are. So they get to 25, 26, and they start making some big decisions about life. We start partnering. We start deciding whether or not to have kids, what our family structure looks like, those kinds of things. And this second part is important. We live in an age of authenticity.
Yep.
People can curate their lives now more than ever. We can opt in and opt out. And people are opting in more and more only to those institutions, those organizations with which they share values.
Yep. Yep.
And so, there has been some angst in the church about decline in attendance. And instead of turning the mirror on ourselves to say, what kind of message are we putting out there?
Right.
We've been saying, what's wrong with the young people? Nothing is wrong with the young people. They're just
Your
saying,
Ethel Merman is quite good, I want to say.
I mean, nothing's wrong with the young people, though.
Nope, the kids are all right.
No, we don't share values. And so that's good news for the church.
I think so.
Good news. That means we know that we need to be more clear about who we are and how we think the church should shape the world.
Right.
So to my folks, I say, all right, well, if you are out in the world and you happen upon some people volunteering and that's how I think, that's how a good number of people at Mayflower wind up here, is that they'll see us or be volunteering alongside us at the Homeless Alliance. And I know that Westminster has some very similar ministries and missions, or will be advocating for, say, a living wage or teacher pay, or to end predatory lending.
Right.
Because all of those things are rooted in our progressive theology.
Right.
Not just like randomly picking things to do.
Right.
But those are rooted in our progressive Christian theology. Then they say, oh, well, our values are aligned here. Maybe it would be worth my time to show up on a Sunday morning.
Right.
And that's what the young people are looking for. And I would say that's what everybody is looking for.
I was just thinking that. I was like, I'm 44 years old and professionally religious, and that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah. And when you ask, I really do try to stay away from these generational, unless I'm making fun of myself as a millennial and as an elder millennial, which I
Who's the icon of the elder millennials? Is it? It's not Daria, is it? That's Gen Z, right?
No, yeah. The difference between elder millennials and younger millennials is that elder millennials know who Will Smith is. Like we call ourselves Willennials. And the younger millennials, they're more like we like the gaming system, they're like we millennials,
Oh,
right?
this
Like
is
that's sort of
beautiful.
the difference. Like elder millennials, we died on the Oregon Trail,
From
right?
dysentery.
Yes, thousands of times, thousands of times. These younger millennials,
I don't know.
they had cell phones like in 6th grade or something.
Oh my gosh.
Also, elder millennials are now all into blue light glasses, which I am modeling right now. It's
Wow.
probably, I refer to them as my millennial bait, but I am all in. I'm all in with these blue light glasses.
Oh my gosh.
Anyway, I
Oh,
don't even know where I started with that.
it's great.
So standard for me.
You and I should do a podcast. This is too much fun.
What could we not talk about?
I mean, there we go. I am sad we only have a few more minutes left. So here's what I want to ask you. What is the last thing that you read or saw? It doesn't have to be Jesus-y. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. What's the last thing that you read or saw that you thought everybody needs to know about this?
Ooh, I am really digging a book called The Inquisitor's Tale. And it is like a Newbery Medal award-winning book. And I think it was written in like 2018 or something like that. But it is, so it's targeted for late elementary, middle school. And it does have the phrase farting dragon in
Come
the
on.
synopsis.
Yes.
And
There we
adults are
go.
generally like, oh, that's not for me. But it
Mhm.
is for you. It is for you adults. I'm talking to whoever is like, nah.
You
And
need to know.
it's the Inquisitor's Tale
Mm.
is about it's set in medieval times, and it is a story about three children and their holy greyhound,
Yes.
and it covers all manner of things, diversity, interfaith alliances, um,
I love it.
race, gender. It's a lovely tale, and those are the kinds of things I think adults learn best from when we overhear something.
Yeah. Oh, well said.
Yeah, Fred Craddock talks about overhearing the gospel, which is what we
Uh-huh.
do every time we read any part of the Bible, any part of it.
Yeah.
We're reading someone else's mail. Um,
Right.
we're hearing someone else's story,
Mm-hmm.
and the distance that overhearing creates for the reader allows us to use our imagination to engage that holy
Mm-hmm.
curiosity,
Yeah.
and to think through some things that we might not otherwise.
The Inquisitor's Tale. I'm gonna look it up. We have a love of middle school lit in our house. Thanks in great part to my wife Geraldine. She is an excellent curator of YA literature. So
Really nice to have like a resident librarian.
listen, our kids are so lucky because I mean, there are things that I know that is not an area that I was ever really interested in. But she's a speech pathologist, so learning communication and how to think. I mean, she's just all in. But that's fantastic. I want to recommend. We just watched this last night. If you have a Hulu subscription, the movie In and of Itself. In and of itself. I'm not even going to tell you anything about it other than at the very beginning it says, put your phones down, be distraction free. They mean it. You've got to do it. Lori, it's an hour and a half. I will say that it's a filmed show of a one-man show on stage. Um, I at one point my heart was beating so fast I thought it was going to bust out of my chest. I cried 2 or 3 times, which is not unusual for me. I'm a crier, but it was all, I mean, I will say it's all about identity. It's one of the most beautiful and effective things I've seen in a long time. And I'm pretty cynical. as a theater guy with a theater degree, I'm cynical about that stuff. This was magical. It was just magical
In and of itself.
in and of itself. Yes.
Okay, I got it.
And
I'm texting
friends, I will find links to both of those things and put them in the comments if you want to come back to this video later to find that. So Inquisitor's Tale in and of itself. Holy cow, a half an hour has flown by.
just like that.
That's amazing. Lori Walke, you are a gift to the universe. And tonight you are a gift to me. And I am grateful, so grateful for your time. Thank you very much for all that you are.
Anytime. Anytime.
I will take you up on that. Friends, we will see you in 3 weeks. I'm going on vacation, so we will not have Pastor Pals for the next 2 weeks. So in 3 weeks, beginning in March, we will have some Pastor Pals, and we will be back. I don't even know who our new Pastor Pal is, but Lori, we may call you at a moment's notice.
Hey, whoever it is will be a delight for them, as it has been for me.
Thank you so much, Lori. Thanks. It was great to talk to you.